My name is Nora Callahan, and the night my brother slid a piece of paper across the kitchen table, I remember thinking it looked like a lease agreement. It was. Sort of. He had typed it up himself, formatted, numbered, with a little header at the top that read Financial Contribution Summary. I almost laughed. Almost. But then I saw the total at the bottom, and every thought I had dissolved into a single, flat silence. $32,000. That was the number my brother had calculated, with a straight face and steady hands, as the amount I owed him for shared household costs accumulated over the past 3 years. He had itemized everything: utilities, groceries, internet, a line that simply said general maintenance, $4,200. Another that read Inconvenience Fee, $1,800. I remember staring at that one for a long time. Inconvenience fee. For living in the house I had helped him buy. My sister-in-law was sitting beside him. She didn't look at me. She was looking at her hands, which told me she had either written this with him, or had seen it before I did. Either way, she had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. My nephew, his son, 7 years old, the kid I had picked up from school twice a week for 2 years, was somewhere down the hall watching cartoons. He didn't know what was happening in that kitchen. He didn't know that his aunt, who had painted his bedroom ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars, because he was afraid of the dark, was being handed an invoice. I looked up at my brother. "What is this?" He leaned back in his chair. "You've been living here 3 years, Nora. You barely pay anything. That's not fair to us. I pay $1,500 a month. That doesn't cover what you actually use." I set the paper down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are starting to shake and you don't want anyone to see. "You came to me," I said. "You called me and asked me to move in. You said it would help both of us. You said." That was before things changed. I asked him what things. He looked at my sister-in-law. She finally looked up. She said they had decided they needed the space, that they were thinking about converting my room into something else, that it was time I figured out my own situation. That last sentence was the one that stayed with me the whole drive to my friend's apartment that night. Figured out my own situation. As if my situation had nothing to do with the fact that I had spent 3 years inside theirs. I need to go back a little, because without the context, none of what comes next makes sense. And I have learned, the hard way, that people will misread silence as compliance, so I want to be precise. When I was 26, I had a good job, a 1-bedroom apartment I loved, and a life I had built quietly and without much help from anyone. I was a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. Not glamorous, but it paid well, and I was good at it, and I came home every night to a space that was entirely mine. My brother, who is 4 years older than me, called me in March of that year. He and my sister-in-law had just bought a house than they could afford, honestly, but no one said that out loud. He had recently switched jobs, and the new salary hadn't stabilized yet. They had a 5-year-old and another baby coming. He said he needed help. He said if I moved in and split the household costs, it would give them time to get on their feet without drowning in the mortgage. I want to be honest. I did not want to do it. My apartment was mine. My routine was mine. But he was my brother. And the word family carries a particular kind of gravity that I have never fully been able to put down. So I said yes. I gave up my lease. I moved into the spare room, and I paid him $1,500 a month, which, combined with their mortgage and bills, I later calculated was covering nearly 40% of their total monthly household costs. I also drove my nephew to and from school. I babysat when they needed a night out. I covered groceries on weeks when my brother's paycheck was late. I painted that bedroom ceiling. I did not do these things to be repaid. I did them because they were my family, and I thought that was what family meant. For 2 years it worked, not perfectly but well enough. My brother got a promotion. His income stabilized. The new baby, my niece, grew into a tiny person who called me by a nickname only she used. Things felt, if not warm, then functional. Then something shifted. I noticed it first in small things. My sister-in-law making comments about how long I spent in the bathroom in the morning. My brother mentioning, once, then twice, that the internet bill had gone up, and he wasn't sure why. A new lock on the garage that I was not given a key to. The energy in the house changed in the way that energy changes when a decision has already been made and no one has told you yet. I asked my brother directly, one Sunday, if there was something wrong. He said no. He said I was reading into things. He suggested maybe I was stressed about work. 3 weeks later, he handed me the paper. $32,000. Due within 60 days. He had included a payment plan at the bottom. Option a lump sum. Option B, $1,600, month surcharge, added to existing contribution for the next 20 months. He said if I couldn't commit to one of the options, he would need me to move out by the end of the following month. Here's what I did not do. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not tell him everything I had given them over 3 years, because I realized, in that moment, that it would not matter. People who reduce your presence in their life to a spreadsheet have already made a decision about what you are worth. Explaining yourself to them is like filing a complaint with the person who wrote the policy. I told him I would think about it. I left the next morning before anyone was awake. I had a bag packed, not everything, just enough, and I drove to my friend Dara's apartment, in Dublin, which is just outside Columbus, and I sat on her couch, and I let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Dara, to her credit, did not say much. She poured coffee, and she sat across from me, and she let me talk until I ran out of words. Then she said, "So what are you actually going to do?" I had already started thinking about it on the drive over. I had some money saved, more than my brother probably assumed, because I had been careful over 3 years in a way that people who are secretly planning an exit tend to be, even when they don't know yet that they're planning an exit. I had enough to put down on an apartment, not in Columbus proper, but close enough. What I did not do, and I want to be clear about this, was pay the $32,000. I did not call my brother back with a payment plan. I did not send a counteroffer. I did not respond to the invoice at all, because I had decided to treat it the way it deserved to be treated, as a document, with no legal standing, written by someone who had confused leverage with love. I found an apartment in 2 weeks. A 1-bedroom in Westerville with a small porch and east-facing windows that filled the place with light every morning. I signed the lease on a Wednesday. I moved my remaining things out of my brother's house on a Saturday, while he was at his son's soccer game, because I had timed it that way deliberately. My sister-in-law was home. She stood in the doorway of my room and watched me pack, and did not offer to help and did not apologize, and I did not ask her for either. I left my key on the kitchen counter. I did not leave a note. Before I tell you what happened 7 weeks later, I want to ask you something. It is right now, wherever you are reading this or listening to this. What time is it, and where are you? Because I genuinely want to know who is in this with me. I'll be back to the story in just a moment. 7 weeks after I moved out, my brother called me on a Thursday evening. I saw his name on my screen and I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring again, then he sent a text. It said, "Nora, please pick up. Something happened." I sat with that for a while. Not because I was being cruel, but because I had learned, in the months leading up to that kitchen table conversation, that urgency from people who have hurt you is not the same as emergency. It is often just the moment their choices have caught up with them. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. His voice was different, tighter, higher, the way voices get when someone is trying to hold themselves together in real time. He told me that the company he worked for had announced layoffs. He was on the list. His last day was in 2 weeks. He said they had almost nothing in savings, which surprised me, and then immediately did not surprise me at all. He said the mortgage was due, and they were already behind on 2 credit card payments, and he didn't know what to do. He asked me if I could help. I want to be careful here about how I describe what I felt, because it was not simple. It was not the clean satisfaction that people sometimes imagine you feel when the person who wronged you ends up struggling. It was more complicated than that, a kind of exhausted grief, because I had loved my brother for my entire life, and somewhere inside that love was still real, but it was now buried under something heavy that he had put there himself. I asked him one question. I said, "What happened to the plan the financial contribution plan you put together for me." There was a long pause. He said, "That was different." I told him I needed some time to think. What he didn't know, what I found out later, through my mother, who had not been part of any of this, but who had her ear closer to the ground than anyone realized, was that my brother and sister-in-law had taken out a personal loan 3 months before the layoff announcement. Not a small one. $40,000, borrowed against the equity in the house. My mother didn't know all the details, but she knew they had used a portion of it to renovate the kitchen, new countertops, new appliances, the open shelving my sister-in-law had been talking about for years. So the house had new countertops, and my brother had handed me a $32,000 invoice. When my mother told me about the loan, I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked her if she thought I should help him. She said, "I think you should do what lets you sleep at night." That is the most useful thing anyone said to me throughout this entire situation. Here is what I decided. I thought about it for 4 days. I made a list, not because I am a particularly list-making person, but because the situation had become complex enough that I needed to see it written down in front of me to understand what I actually believed. On one side, my brother is my brother. His kids are my niece and nephew. The baby I watched come home from the hospital was going to grow up in a house that might be foreclosed on. None of that was her fault. None of it was my nephew's fault either. He still texted me sometimes, that 7-year-old, from my sister-in-law's phone. Little messages that were mostly just strings of emojis, and one time a photo of a drawing he had made of the two of us. On the other side, my brother had looked me in the eye after 3 years and handed me a document designed to humiliate me into either paying money I did not owe or leaving. He had not apologized. On the phone, he had not apologized. His first call was not to say he was sorry. His first call was to ask for help. I decided I would not give him money. But I was not going to do nothing. I called my mother back. I told her I would like to take the kids, both of them, for the next 2 weekends, to give my brother and sister-in-law space to figure out their situation. I would not be doing this for them. I would be doing it for a 7-year-old who sent me emoji texts and a toddler who had a nickname for me that no one else used. I also reached out to a friend of mine who works in HR at a distribution company in the Columbus area. I sent him my brother's resume. My brother had given it to me 2 years ago, when he was between jobs, and I had kept it, because that is the kind of person I apparently am, and I asked if there were any openings. There were. I passed along the contact information. I did not tell my brother I had done it. I did not want credit. I did not want a conversation. I just did it, and I put it down. What I did not do, I did not write my brother a check. I did not renegotiate. I did not move back in. I did not pretend the document had never existed. My brother texted me 2 weeks after our phone call. He had a second interview at the distribution company. He did not know I was connected to it. He said, "Things might be turning around a little. I wanted to let you know." I wrote back, "I'm glad." That was the whole exchange. He got the job. I know because my mother told me, and because 3 weeks after that, he called me again. This time the call was different. He was quieter. He asked if he could come over. I said yes. He sat in my apartment, my new apartment, the one with the east-facing windows, and he looked around at it for a little while without saying anything. Then he said, "I handled things badly." I did not tell him he was wrong. He said the invoice was my sister-in-law's idea, but that he had agreed to it and that agreeing to it was on him. He said he had been scared about money for longer than he had admitted to anyone, and that fear had made him do something he wasn't proud of. He did not cry. He did not make it dramatic. He said it plainly, which I respected more than theatrics would have been. I told him that what he had done had hurt me. Not because of the money. I had never expected to be compensated for the things I chose to do for their family, but because it had reframed 3 years of my life as a transaction. It had taken something I had given freely and handed it back to me as a debt. That was the part that had been hardest to carry. He nodded. He said, "I know." We did not hug. We did not declare everything fixed. He stayed for about 40 minutes, and then he left, and I sat on my couch afterward and looked at the light coming through the east-facing windows, and I tried to take stock of where I actually was. I had an apartment. A good one, with light. I had a job I was still good at. I had Dara, who had poured coffee without being asked. I had a nephew who texted me emojis, and a niece who had a special name for me. I had a mother who had said the most useful thing anyone said to me. Do what lets you sleep at night. I was sleeping fine. There's something I've been thinking about since all of this happened, something I want to say plainly, because I think it gets lost in stories like mine. The point is not that I won. I am not sure what winning even looks like in a situation that involves people you love, doing something that diminishes you. I did not get the $32,000 erased in some dramatic moment of justice. My brother did not grovel. My sister-in-law has not, to this day, said anything directly to me about what happened, and I have made my peace with the probability that she never will. The point is something smaller and more durable than winning. The point is that I did not pay a debt that wasn't mine. I did not reshape myself around someone else's version of what I owed. I did not move back in. I did not make myself smaller, to make the situation more comfortable for the people who had made it uncomfortable in the first place. I took the kids for 2 weekends, and I drove them to the park, and I bought them ice cream, and I did not do it to look generous. I did it because they are children, and they did not ask to be born into a complicated family, and loving them costs me nothing that I am not glad to spend. There is a version of this story where I tell you I cut everyone off and never looked back and lived my best life in perfect peace. That version is more satisfying, I know. It has cleaner edges. But the true version is this. Family is not a simple thing to put down, even when it is heavy, even when it has been unkind. What you can do, what I did, is decide how much of your own life you are willing to reorganize around other people's choices. And the answer, for me, was not much. Not anymore. Protecting your peace is not a punishment you hand someone else. It is something you build for yourself, quietly, one decision at a time, in an apartment with east-facing windows where the light comes in every morning whether or not anyone else has apologized. I'm still building it. Most days, it is enough.